A hidden human warship emerged from the void. The galaxy panicked instantly. My name is Vathar Solis. I am a diplomatic attaché for the Kithrani people, and I have spent the last 14 years of my life aboard Galactic Concord Station, watching species argue over trade routes and border disputes. I thought I understood how the galaxy worked. I thought I understood power. Then the humans reminded all of us how wrong we were. Let me explain something first. The galaxy is not a kind place. It is managed. 600 years ago, dozens of species signed the Concord Treaty and agreed to maintain peace through diplomacy instead of conquest. 3 elder powers sit at the top of that arrangement, the Valith Dominion, who are tall and scaled and believe strength is the only currency that matters. The Sithari Collective, a hive mind species that thinks as one and builds technology the rest of us barely understand. And the Oreth Communion, ancient psychic monks who have been alive longer than most civilizations. These 3 keep the peace. Everyone else follows. And then there are the humans. 200 years ago, we found them. A young species, confined to a small stretch of stars, loud and aggressive and dangerously curious. The Concord decided they were a threat before they even had a chance to prove otherwise. A coalition fleet was sent. The Terran suppression campaign lasted 9 years. The official record says humanity was quickly subdued. The classified record, which I have read, tells a very different story. They were outnumbered 50 to 1. They lost a quarter of the coalition's ships before they finally ran out of their own. They did not surrender. They simply had nothing left to fight with. The Concord imposed the restriction treaty. Humanity was confined to 12 star systems. No superluminal research. No military expansion. Regular inspections to ensure compliance. They were labeled a restricted species, which is a polite way of saying they were caged. And for 200 years they complied. They smiled during inspections. They traded quietly within their borders. They caused no trouble. Most species forgot about them entirely. My grandfather did not forget. He served in the suppression campaign. He never spoke about it. Not once in my entire childhood. Then one night, old and tired and deep into a bottle of Kithrani wine, he grabbed my arm and said something I have never forgotten. He said, "Never trust a species that smiles when it bleeds." His hands were shaking. I was 12 years old, and I had never seen him afraid of anything before that moment. I carried those words with me for decades. I read every intelligence report about humanity I could find. Most of my colleagues thought I was paranoid. They laughed at the idea that the little confined species in their little confined systems could ever matter again. I did not laugh. Something in those files kept me awake at night. Unverified sightings of human vessels in deep void space, where there are no stars and no reason for anything to exist. Energy signatures that matched no known technology. Gravitational disturbances near the restricted zone that were dismissed as natural phenomena. Every report was filed. None were investigated. Then came the day everything changed. I was sitting in a routine briefing when the Priority Zero alert hit every screen on the station simultaneously. The room went silent in a way I had never experienced. Priority Zero had not been invoked in 40 years. A Valith border patrol near the restricted zone had detected a gravitational anomaly. Something enormous had dropped out of superluminal transit in dead space. A region of absolute nothing between stars. The patrol commander's voice came through on the emergency channel. He was calm, but it was the wrong kind of calm. The kind that covers something terrible. He reported that his sensors were returning contradictory data. The object had the mass of a small moon, but it had no thermal signature. No electromagnetic emissions. It was invisible to everything except gravity itself. It was just sitting there in the dark, waiting. I looked across the assembly hall at the seat reserved for the human ambassador. Commander Lena Vasik's chair was empty. Her aides said she was indisposed. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. 4 hours later, the Valith Patrol activated their highest resolution scanning arrays and pointed them at the anomaly. The image resolved on screens across the station. I watched the faces of the most powerful beings in the galaxy as they saw what the humans had built. It was not a moon, it was a ship. 12 kilometers long, angular and brutal, armored in layered composites that swallowed sensor pings instead of reflecting them. The hull was smooth and dark, dotted with thousands of ports that our analysts would later identify as weapon housings. It had no visible engines in any configuration we recognized. It should not have existed. Galactic naval doctrine states that any ship over 3 kilometers is impractical. The largest Valith dreadnought is 4 kilometers. The Scytherai have nothing over 5. This thing was 12, and it had been hidden. A single transmission pulsed from the vessel on an open frequency. No words, just an identification tag. INS Prometheus. Terran Deep Void Command. A command structure no one in the Concord had ever heard of. The panic that followed was unlike anything I have witnessed in my career. The Valith ambassador was screaming into a communicator, his scales flushing a shade of dark crimson that I had never seen on a Valith before. That color meant terror. They never let outsiders see it. He was beyond caring. The Valith High Command began emergency mobilization of their core fleets. The Scytherai collective went still. Every single Scytherai individual on the station stopped moving at the same instant, like puppets with their strings cut. They stood frozen for 11 seconds. When they resumed, their movements were different, faster, sharper, perfectly coordinated. They had shifted into a threat response mode that I did not know existed. The Oreth Elder, a being more than 800 years old, opened all 4 of its eyes. In my entire life on this station, I had never seen it do that. It spoke a single word into the silence. Finally. Smaller delegations began evacuating. Ships launched from docking bays in desperate swarms. Some collided with each other in their hurry to leave. I stood at my console and watched civilization begin to crack. I did not evacuate. I went to my secure terminal and pulled every classified file the Kethrani intelligence service had on humanity. I needed to understand. What I found made me feel like a fool. The inspection reports over the past century had grown increasingly vague. Inspectors visited the 12 human systems and reported full compliance with less and less detail each time. Some of those inspectors retired early. A few simply vanished from the records entirely. No one followed up. No one asked questions. For 200 years, humanity had played the part of the obedient, beaten species. They had smiled during inspections. They had said all the right things. And somewhere in the empty void between stars, where no one ever looked because there was nothing to see, they had built something impossible. We did not contain them. They let us believe we did. 12 hours after the Prometheus appeared, Commander Lena Vasic walked into the Concord assembly. She was not tall. She was not physically imposing. She wore a plain dark uniform with no medals, no decorations. And she moved through a room full of panicking aliens with the calm confidence of someone who had already won a game the rest of us did not know we were playing. She asked to address the council. No one objected. She did not raise her voice. She did not make threats. She simply explained, in clear and measured words, that the Prometheus was one ship. She paused after saying that. One. She let the words settle into the room like a stone dropping into still water. Then she said that humanity was requesting a renegotiation of the restriction treaty. Not demanding, requesting. The politeness was more unsettling than any weapon. She did not say how many other ships existed. She did not say where they were. She did not describe what they could do. She only said that the Prometheus was built to be found, when humanity decided the time was right. Then she said something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. She said, "We wanted you to see one, so you would understand that what you do not see is the part that should concern you." The Valith, proud and stubborn to the last, refused to accept it. Their patrol fleet surrounding the Prometheus launched a warning volley. Low-yield plasma rounds fired across the ship's bow, a show of defiance. The Prometheus did not fire back. It did something far worse. Every system on all 17 Valith warships went dark at the same instant. Engines, weapons, life support, communications, everything. 40,000 crew members sat in perfect silence and perfect darkness for exactly 60 seconds. Then every system reactivated, undamaged, as if nothing had happened. The ship's own logs showed no intrusion, no energy impact, no attack of any kind. Their systems simply stopped, and then they started again. The Prometheus had not fired a single shot. I understood then what the humans had done. They could have destroyed those ships. Instead, they proved that every warship in the galaxy was already at their mercy. They had chosen to demonstrate mercy itself as their weapon. The Valith patrol commander opened a channel and stood down. His voice was trembling. The Valith ambassador on the station sank into his chair and did not speak again for the rest of the day. Negotiations began because there was no alternative. Vasic presented humanity's terms. The entire assembly braced for the worst. They expected demands for territory, reparations, subjugation, revenge. What they got was a list so reasonable, it broke something in the room. Humanity wanted 4 things: removal of restricted species status, a seat on the Concord Council with equal voting rights, open trade and travel, and a formal apology for the Terran suppression campaign to be entered into the permanent record. That was it. A species with the power to dominate the galaxy was asking to be treated as an equal. Nothing more. I approached Vasek privately afterward. I needed to understand. I asked her the question that was burning a hole in my mind. Why? Why not take more? Why not punish the species that had caged her people for 2 centuries? She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were steady and impossibly tired, the eyes of someone carrying the weight of generations. Then she said, "Because we remember what it felt like to be caged. We did not build the Prometheus to become what you were. We built it so no one could ever do that to us again." I had no answer for that. I still do not. The Concord voted unanimously to accept humanity's terms. Some delegations voted with visible reluctance. It did not matter. The age of pretending humanity was small and defeated was over. In the weeks that followed, intelligence agencies across the galaxy scrambled to reassess everything. The Kethrani Service produced a revised threat assessment on humanity. Its conclusion was a single sentence: "We do not know what they are capable of, and we may never know." The Prometheus departed the way it had arrived. It folded into the void between stars, its impossible engines carrying it back to wherever it came from. Within hours, there was no trace it had ever existed, except the memory. The memory would never fade. Before I left the station, the ancient Oreth elder found me in a corridor. It placed one of its long, thin hands on my shoulder. It said, 800 years, I have watched species rise and fall. The ones who survive are not the strongest or the smartest. They are the ones who remember pain and choose not to inflict it. The humans remember. That is why they will outlast us all. I returned to my quarters that evening and sat alone in the dark for a long time. I thought about my grandfather's warning. Never trust a species that smiles when it bleeds. I had carried those words like a shield for my entire adult life. But sitting there, staring out at the empty void where the Prometheus had been, I wondered if he had it wrong. Maybe the smile was never a warning. Maybe it was a promise. We bled. We survived. And when we came back not to conquer, but to prove we did not need to. I whispered it to myself in the darkness of my room, and the words felt like the truest thing I had ever spoken. They did not come back to conquer. They came back to prove they did not need to. And somehow, that is the most terrifying thing of all.